I guess it's time I get on to week 26, the crying of lot 49. Now, again, this is late. I should have done this last week. Um, I had the book done, but man, it has been rough trying to get these done. So, well, I had this book read. Well, I've read this book, I don't even know how many times. I mean, uh, there's at least five different pins in here, and then there's the tabs, and then I know I've read it. I wrote my master's thesis on this, which and we'll talk about in a minute about that short movie Danpen Teki Shishiki that I posted 2 weeks ago, or 8 days ago, a week ago. What is that movie? Okay, so that movie is what a friend of mine, Keith Payne, his interpretation of what I went through in working on my master's thesis. Um, my master's thesis dealt with a confusion between the book and reality. And so that was what interested Keith, and he saw the confusion between my life and the book and reality, and he saw, so um, what he did was he had the main character, Tyler Yashimoto, who is supposed to be a representation of me. Um, he is trying to write his master's thesis, and his thesis advisor walks into the ocean. That's what that bit's about. And then Tyler Yashimoto begins to see scenes from the book, like the bicycle. That is a image from a Remedios Vero painting that is crucial to a certain part of the Lot 49. And and then there are other things from the book, like the guy in black who snaps his fingers, and the other guy with him. They're images of the Trastero. And see, part of what I was arguing in my thesis is that in this book, the main character Oedipumas looks out of the book at the reader and becomes self-aware. It's a weird kind of reading, but that's the kind of reading I gave the book. And so that's the reading that Keith focuses on here. So that woman who is speaking in Dutch and typing and all that paper is flowing, that is keeping record of the fact that Oedipumas is becoming aware. She's becoming aware, she says, or something to that effect. Okay, so the movie does not explain the book, and it's not intended to. It's more just about the way in which my life sort of came apart at the time, and it did. Uh, he doesn't go into everything, but that's basically the idea here in what you see there. And Danpenteki Shishiki means something like the fragments of a mind or something to that effect in Japanese. I don't remember exactly. It's been many years. Now, for the record, I did my best over the past 20 years, whatever it's been since that movie was made, to find Keith. And he has no internet presence of any kind that I can find. I've tried every spelling of his name. He's got an IMDb credit or two because he worked on a couple of Hollywood films when he was in Hollywood. Um, and I tried to look up that and connect with that. I tried everything I could think of. So I have been unsuccessful, but I am curious what's happened to that guy. We had a bit of a falling out over something totally unrelated to this particular project, um, and I don't know how his life went after that falling out because he kind of cut me out of his life at that time. But even that was more or less pre the kind of internet we have now. So but in any case, I've lost track of him. All right, so now on to the Chrono 49. Okay. Now, despite this being a relatively short book, this is Pynchon's second novel, written in 1966, and he says in the beginning of his collection of short stories called Slow Learner that it's a novel in which he forgot everything he knew about writing, which is kind of funny because, broadly speaking, this book is way, way, way more read and way more valued by many critics than V is. His next book, Gravity's Rainbow, is of course the monster of his early career. His career can be divided into basically three parts. You know, you have V, the Crying Out Loud 49, and Gravity's Rainbow. That covers from 63 to 72. And then you have Vineland, Mason and Dixon, and Against the Day. And those two of those three books, Mason and Dixon and Against the Day, are also massive, massive, massive books and rival Gravity's Rainbow as possibly being his best work. It's hard to say. I have read Mason and Dixon, I think, twice, and I've read Against the Day once. So we're going to be heading into newer territory when we get there. Red Vineland 3 or 4 times, and then after that is like his third part of his career, sort of his late career, and that would be Inherent Vice and Bleeding Edge so far, and the new novel whose name I do not recall. And at least in my mind, those are definitely lesser works. They're definitely shorter. They're less jam-packed with reference. In fact, even Mason and Dixon and Against the Day are less jam-packed than Gravity's Rainbow, V, and The Crying Out 49. That's kind of like the hallmark of this era, is just being just unbelievably packed. Like, you know, if we go to the first sentence of this novel, by the way, okay, one summer afternoon, Miss Oedipa Moss came home from a Tupperware party whose hostess had put perhaps too much kirsch in the fondue to find that she, Oedipa, had been named executor, or she supposed executrice, of the estate of one Pierce Inverarity, a California real estate mogul who had once lost $2 million in his spare time, but still had assets numerous and tangled enough to make the job of sorting it all out more than honorary. Massive, huge, long, crazy sentence. Grammatically awkward in places, but clear enough. But it sets up so many things. Oedipa? What kind of name is Oedipa? Is it meant to refer to the Greek Oedipus? Is it meant to refer to Freud? Well, it's female, Oedipa. What do we make of that? Why not Oedipus? Why not Oedipus Rex? Instead of Oedipus Rex, we get Oedipa Moss. Um, Oedipa goes to a gay bar at one point in this novel called The Greek Way. So there's a definite, direct connection back to that idea. Oedipa also uh, goes to see her shrink, Dr. Hilarious, who is a former Gestapo uh, person or someone who worked at least in the concentration camps, and he has embraced Freud because Freud is Jewish, even though he says that Freud, you know, he's even embraced the hard parts of Freud. So there's a recognition by the person who wrote this novel that Freud is complex and not necessarily correct. But we have Oedipa here, so Oedipa complex there or not? Hard to say. Okay, and then Maas, Maas. What is that? Is that meant to be a reference to the Spanish mas, meaning more? I mean, her husband goes by the name of Mucho, Mucho Mas, so much more. So is that, but his real name is actually Wendell, not Mucho. He just goes by Wendell. He just goes by Mucho, but he's always called Mucho in the novel. He's never called Wendell except in reference to his name. And then, you know, what are we supposed to make of this? How deep do either of those go? But then, in a way, this novel is almost a deliberate overloading and parody of the kind of novel that a literary critic might want. He talks about there being a high meaning to low puns, and he does that consistently throughout this book. You know, Mucho Mas works at one point as a used salesman, and he sees a sign that says nada, 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 nothing in Spanish, nada, nothing. NADA, National Automotive Dealers Association. Um, and he sees this, and it reminds him of the meaningless and the pointlessness of life. And so he sees these used cars, and there's this description of the backseat of a car just full of just the random detritus of a life, and how these lives are just meaningless lives piled on meaningless lives piled on meaningless lives. Okay, is that supposed to mean something, or is that just a throwaway nonsense that Pynchon's thrown in here? Now, Mucho works for radio station KCUF. Okay, now is that just a dumb, ha ha ha, I got the word in there, or is there something going on there with that name? It's very much like that Britney Spears song, If You CK Me. Why is it named that? Well, is it just so she could get that word on the radio, or is there actually some kind of point to it? Same here. Is there a point to it? Is there a point to her name being Oedipa Maas? How about Pierce and rarity? We're never told how old Pierce is. We're never told that he actually, in fact, died. Oedipa, at a certain point, believes that maybe the whole thing is a put on, but she never seems to question whether or not Pierce actually died. We have no idea how old Pierce is. Who was Pierce? Pierce was um, a man who she had a fling with, perhaps a boyfriend, perhaps a serious relationship, perhaps a weekend. It isn't clear at all how serious her relationship was with Pierce. Um, Oedipa is still a relatively young woman, but she and Mucho have no kids because of the Oedipa name. I have to question whether or not, this is not something that I thought of back when I wrote my thesis, but, I'm looking at this from whole new world lens here. How female is Edda to begin with? There's the possibility she's not even meant to be female. After all, this is a construction of words, and Pynchon is very aware of that level of what he's doing. So when he refers to Oedipa as she, he's invoking the feminine. But what does that mean? What baggage does the word she contain? And does Oedipa in this novel, is her containment? Is it actually female? You know, it's a and you think, okay, these are silly questions, yeah, but that's the point. There is no stupid question. There is no smart question. There's just questions with Pynchon because you don't know if any of it is supposed to mean something or if it's supposed to mean nothing. Like the Remedios painting, the Remedios Vero paintings. They tell a story of a woman who recognizes the confinement of her life and she gets out. Okay, now in my thesis, I read that triptych as a way of reading the novel as Oedipus catching on to the fact that she's trapped and getting out. Is that valid? I questioned it in my thesis, and it should be questioned. Is it valid? Does Oedipus get out? I don't know. The novel ends with her awaiting the crying of Lot 49. Now, so what the hell is that? What is the crying of Lot 49? Well, okay, so the plot, the plot of this novel is relatively simple and straightforward. This woman, Oedipa Maas, is made executor of this former boyfriend, lover, fling, who knows, uh, rich man, made executor of his will. And so she goes to execute the will. And going through the man's assets, which are numerous, she comes across a collection of stamps. In this collection of stamps, there are a half dozen or so that are very, very deliberate forgeries. Now, most forgeries attempt to replicate something accurately. These forgeries don't replicate things accurately. They replicate things with a deliberate sort of macabre or dark humor twist. So, like someone's head will be at an awkward angle, or something like that. Um, okay, so what? So she finds these stamps. Well, these stamps may or may not be related to an alternative mailing system called the Tristero. And the Tristero uh, may or may not be important. So, at the very end of the novel, she is going to the crying of Lot 49. That's the 49th lot of the crying of the auction of Pier's belongings, Pierce and Verity's belongings, in which these forged stamps are, so that she can get a look at the person who is bidding for them. Because if this person is from the Tristero, it will prove that the Tristero is real, and then all the connections that she's made throughout the entire novel will be real and valid. But if nobody shows up, or if this person is not a member of the Tristero, it will prove nothing. Now, the novel has to end at some point, and that's where Pynchon has chose to end it. But does it even really matter? In the end, no, it doesn't, because a kind of conspiracy theory that Oedipus is following doesn't have an endpoint. It's one of these situations where a paranoid belief is suggested and then followed, and then one constantly searches for evidence that is constantly deferred. Okay, so meaning is always deferred into the future. Yes, there's a Derridian kind of post-structuralist kind of, thing going on there. Meaning is always deferred into the future. And that's exactly what happens. Is Oedipa cannot look back to find what's true. She's trying to look forward to what's true. But neither way is anything available to her. All of the connections she makes start disappearing from her. Manny Depresso, who is an actor, is chased by uh, the mafia. And by the way, 1966, writing about the mafia, despite the fact that by the time I read this, that seemed old hat. If you think back to it, published in 1966, probably written in 64, 65, around that time period, this was relatively newish material to be writing about things like that. And Manny Depresso, there's another name, Manny Depresso, manic depressive. Does that matter? Are we supposed to do something with that? It's hard to say. Manny Depresso is chased by the mafia, and that indicates that there could be some real danger to Oedipa. But is the Tristero actually dangerous? Again, if they're even real, does it matter? What are they? Okay, so back a long time ago in Dutch history, there was something called the Thurn and Taxis uh, uh, postal business, I guess. And this is real, by the way. The Thurn and Taxis is real. And they had a postal monopoly. And this is where Pynchon's alternative history kind of seeps in, is according to the novel, an alternative to this Thurn and Taxis system, the Tristero came along. And that's where, you know, the post horn. See the post horn? Well, here it's not muted, but in the novel, where is it? In the novel, it is muted. There's a mute in it, and so that is what Tristero is apparently doing, muting the post horn. Here it is. There's the muted. There's the muted post horn. Okay, it's the same thing as that, but with a mute. And maybe that does have a mute at the very end there. I don't know. I'm not really sure what a mute would look like on a post horn, but there's definitely a mute on this one. Okay. Um, and so she starts seeing, she first encounters this existence of this thing in a Jacobean revenge tragedy, uh, revived by a guy named Driblet. Well, she goes to see the play. Driblet has a line in there about the Tristero. She gets interested in this. She goes looking it up, tries to find what it is. She looks into the book. She can't find it in the play. The guy just apparently added the line. She doesn't know why. She tries to get in touch with him. He He's walked off into the ocean and, committed whatever. He's gone. She goes to the bookstore. She bought the book. It's burned down, and of course, it was owned by Inverarity, and the theater where Driblet worked was owned by Inverarity, and then remember Manny Depresso? I'm pretty sure what the thing he was working on was again owned by um, into rarity. And this dealt with bones that were used as charcoal, and that's in the play as well. So that's why she goes to the play, because the bones and the charcoal, and then on and on and on. This crazy, crazy, crazy connection of things that eventually wounds her up, connecting with something called the Enemerati Anonymous, the unloved. And this is where, is Pynchon connecting here with an early version of something like, the incel community, or people who declare themselves, asexual, because these are people who cannot find love, or perhaps don't even seek love. They're the unloved, the ones left out of the Republic. And okay, and there's another thing, 49. Is 49 irrelevant, or is 49, as you know, as you might see, is this is the in a democratic situation, when you have a vote and it's very close, the 51% win and the 49 loses. So the 49 is the always loser. Again, like Benny Profane, the Schmiel. And yeah, Oedipa does a bit of yo-yoing back and forth, and Mucho does have a certain kind of Schmiel appeal, as does perhaps her lover, Metzger, who both of them uh, kind of sort of disappear from her life, going after young women, apparently. Well, women, kids, going after 17, 16-year-olds. Metzger runs away with one, and Mucho, I guess, in order to avoid his numerous affairs with young age, underage girls, which Oedipa knows is happening, um, gets involved in the bridge, which is Dr. Hilarious's experiments in LSD, which is that supposed to mirror something from, like the MK Ultra and other kinds of experiments that the CIA or the FBI did on various kinds of mind control? I don't know. It definitely connects with some things in Gravity's Rainbow, which we'll get to, eventually, with the White Visitation. Um, but at this point, and then Hilarious himself. I mean, what are we supposed to make of him? I mean, in one of the most bizarre scenes in the entire book, in a book filled of bizarre scenes, by the way, uh, Dr. Hilarious, you know, Oedipa yo-yos back up to Kinneret among the pines, where she's from, and goes to Dr. Hilarious, her psychiatrist, and he is holed up with a gun shooting people, or shooting at people. He said nobody yet. What are you supposed to make of that? That's a kind of nutso kind of situation. Oedipa manages to disarm him and get the police in, and they take care of him and all this sort of stuff. And she's not supposed to leave, but she leaves anyway and goes back to San Narciso, where Inverity's estate is, because she's doing her job as this executrice, and what is that all about even? Um, like I said, we don't even have any proof that Inverarity is even dead. I mean, she never goes to his funeral or his wake. She never gets any actual like confirmation, death certificate, or anything like that. Apparently, whatever happened with that is off the radar. If he has any family, she does no connection to any of that. You know, uh, Assuming that this guy would have been, in this fiction, well enough known that he would have had connections or something, but no. He's got this one lawyer, Metzger, and then a law firm she connects to at one point, and a stamp collecting dude, which I don't know. Did he just make all this to uh, uh, punk her, which is one of the things that she thinks may have happened? But oh, so, what do you make this book? Great book, 187 pages, just full of crap. Every page, every word is Maybe there's something there, maybe there isn't. Maybe it's like, it's like hieroglyphics, as Pynchon even says at one point, and that's where it becomes sort of a parody of a literary novel, because maybe there's nothing here. Maybe it's just a bunch of garbage. I mean, after all, there is no such thing as Oedipus. There is no such thing as invariety. None of these people are real. None of this is real. This is just a bunch of words on a piece of paper. There's nothing here. And there's a certain kind of awareness that that is what's going on here as well. That you are reading a fiction, that you're reading some kind of entertainment or some kind of waste of time. Is there kind of a what's his name? Frank O'Hara kind of, um, improvement for what, as he says in one of his poems. What are you improving somebody for? For death? Death. Don't ever antagonize the horn. DEATH, or waste. We await silent Steros. We await silent Steros emergence. Um, anyway, so how much of this is just Pynchon's obviously enjoying just mocking literary critics and mocking the search for meaning and that kind of thing. But is he also serious? Is there a serious edge? He talks about, the excluded middle being bad shit at one point here, and how America, so much promise, is coming apart. And I can't help reading this in 2025. I can't help but think that this is almost even prescient. That way back, in the 60s, he sort of got that there was a growing problem, a growing rift in American society between those going this way and those going that way. And we've seen this before in the V and the left and right, and that is a constant image in Pynchon. Things going one way, things going another. And are they going like this, which should still move up, or are they going this way, opposing each other to where nothing happens? And in Pynchon, it might be important whether or not they're going this way or this way. How much, V is more this. So there's still maybe progress going on. That's the other thing too. Do we have a Hegelian progression going on? Are things going somewhere? And maybe they are, maybe they aren't. Maybe we're just, waiting for death. Is that it? I mean, improvement for what? Where is the progression? So, you know, critique of enlightenment, maybe. Critique of progress, maybe. Goofy book full of insanity, maybe. Um, yeah. Uh, this book, there's just so much in here that you know just I can't even begin to go into everything here. I will say though that this reading through, that scene with Hilarious and the Gestapo and his trying to use Freud and mm, yeah, not sure what's going on there, but that's where I would want to look now. That's the place I'd want to go into. And in my thesis, I don't even think I mentioned it because I think my mind is on other more abstract things. But a more practical kind of what in the world is going on there is where I'd probably be now. All right, enough. Definitely worth reading. We'll get back to Pynchon. We do Gravity's Rainbow in a week or two. All right. See you later.